A husband threw a cake in his black wife's face for refusing to pay the bill at an expensive restaurant. But what happened afterward shocked everyone. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching us from. Jessica Williams stepped into the expansive gallery hall, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floors. The room was a sea of glittering gowns and tailored suits, the scent of hors d'oeuvres mingling with notes of jasmine and amber from expensive perfumes. This was her world. High society events, charitable galas, and business mixers. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite smiles and nods with acquaintances. Yet, beneath her poised exterior, there was a familiar ache, the feeling of being seen only as a figurehead, an extension of her family's wealth and legacy, rather than for the person she truly was. Her father, Edward Williams, was a financial magnate who had built a vast empire from scratch, and her mother, Camille, was an influential art collector. Jessica had inherited their sharp mind and keen eye for detail, but she had also inherited the burden of their name. Every success she achieved in her career as an investment strategist was dismissed by skeptics as nepotism, and every failure scrutinized as a potential embarrassment to her family. As she reached for a glass of champagne from a passing server, her attention was caught by a man standing across the room. He was tall, with sharp features and a confident air that seemed out of place in the sea of forced politeness. His gaze met hers, and he smiled, a genuine, crooked smile that made her pulse quicken. He didn't seem like the type to belong here, but that only intrigued her more. "Jessica Williams," he said smoothly as he approached, offering his hand. His voice had a deep, warm tone that carried a hint of mischief. "You're a hard woman to miss in a crowd." She tilted her head, intrigued. "And you are?" Stefan Daniels. "Just a humble architect trying to blend in at a fancy gala," he replied with a wink. Jessica chuckled, feeling the tension of the evening ease slightly. His casual demeanor was refreshing, a stark contrast to the stiff formalities she was used to. They spent the rest of the evening talking, finding common ground in their shared love of modern art and cityscapes. Stefan spoke passionately about his work designing community spaces and revitalizing urban neighborhoods, and Jessica found herself captivated by his vision. Over the next few weeks, Stefan became a fixture in her life. He wasn't intimidated by her success or her family's wealth. At least, that's how it seemed. He made her laugh, listened to her frustrations about work, and treated her like a person, not a brand. It wasn't long before Jessica found herself falling for him, despite the cautious warnings from her friends and family. Her best friend, Angela, had been the most vocal. "Jess, he's charming, sure, but something feels off. He seems too eager, like he's trying to prove something." Jessica dismissed her concerns. "Not everyone is out to get me, Angie. Maybe he just likes me for me." Her parents were more subtle, but no less skeptical. During a dinner at their estate, her father had asked Stefan pointed questions about his career and background, his tone polite but probing. Stefan answered with ease, but Jessica noticed the tightness in his jaw afterward. "I'm not here to impress your dad," he'd said later, brushing it off with a laugh. "I'm here for you." Despite the doubts whispered in her ear, Jessica was smitten. Stefan proposed less than a year after they met, and she accepted without hesitation. The wedding was a grand affair, held in the sprawling gardens of her family's estate. Jessica spared no expense, ensuring every detail was perfect. Stefan, on the other hand, seemed more focused on the guest list, insisting on inviting influential figures he claimed could help him expand his business. On the surface, everything seemed idyllic, but there were cracks in the foundation that Jessica chose to ignore. During the wedding planning, Stefan had clashed with her over everything from the choice of menu to the seating arrangements, accusing her of being controlling whenever she disagreed with his suggestions. It was her mother who first voiced what Jessica had been trying to suppress. "Jessie, darling," Camille said as they stood in the bridal suite on the morning of the wedding. "Are you sure about this? You don't have to go through with it if you're having second thoughts." Jessica shook her head, brushing off her mother's concern. "Mom, it's just nerves. Stefan is a good man. He loves me." Her mother sighed but said nothing more, her expression unreadable. The ceremony was beautiful, and for a brief moment, Jessica allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale. As she stood next to Stefan, exchanging vows under a canopy of roses, she pushed aside the nagging doubts. This was her chance at happiness, a partnership built on love and mutual respect, or so she thought. As the reception wound down and guests began to depart, Jessica noticed Stefan talking animatedly with a group of men she didn't recognize. She overheard snippets of their conversation, enough to realize he was networking, using the wedding as an opportunity to pitch his projects. Her chest tightened with unease, but she told herself it didn't matter. It was his way of contributing, of proving he belonged in her world. That night, as they left for their honeymoon, Stefan held her hand tightly, whispering promises of a future filled with love and adventure. Jessica wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she had made the right choice. But as the plane took off, leaving behind the world she knew, a small voice in the back of her mind asked if she was flying toward happiness or disaster. Jessica silenced the voice, determined to make her marriage work. After all, she thought, love was about compromise. Little did she know just how much she would be asked to compromise, and how much it would cost her. The honeymoon began in Paris, a city that had always held a special place in Jessica's heart. Walking hand in hand along the Seine, exploring the hidden corners of Montmartre, and indulging in decadent French cuisine, it all felt like a dream. Stefan was attentive, affectionate, and endlessly charming. He made her laugh with his attempts to speak French and listened intently as she shared childhood memories of visiting the city with her parents. For a brief moment, Jessica believed the fairy tale. She convinced herself that her doubts were nothing more than pre-wedding jitters, amplified by the opinions of those around her. Stefan loved her, and she was determined to make their marriage work. But the cracks began to show even before their bags were unpacked. On their second night in Paris, Jessica chose a sleek black dress and a pair of heels her mother had gifted her. She felt elegant, confident. When Stefan saw her, his lips curved into a smile, but his words carried a subtle sting. "You look stunning," he said, his eyes scanning her up and down. "But don't you think that dress is a little much? It might draw the wrong kind of attention." Jessica frowned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, his tone light. "Nothing, babe. You look amazing. I just don't want people to think you're trying too hard." It was a small comment, seemingly insignificant, but it stayed with her throughout the evening. She found herself second-guessing her outfit, wondering if she had indeed overdone it. Stefan, meanwhile, seemed completely at ease, joking with the waitstaff and ordering for her without asking what she wanted. By the end of the honeymoon, Jessica began noticing a pattern. Stefan would make casual remarks about her choices, her clothes, her makeup, even the way she spoke to strangers. "You're too nice," he said one afternoon when she struck up a conversation with a shopkeeper. "Not everyone deserves your time." At first, she brushed it off as his way of protecting her, but the frequency of his comments grew. They weren't overtly cruel, but they carried an undercurrent of criticism that made her feel as though she were constantly falling short. When they returned home, real life crept in. Jessica threw herself back into her work, excited to dive into a new project that had the potential to reshape her firm's approach to sustainable investing. She shared her ideas with Stefan over dinner, expecting him to be proud of her ambition. Instead, he dismissed her enthusiasm with a flippant comment. "Sounds complicated," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Don't you ever get tired of all that stress? I mean, you don't have to work, you know. We're doing fine." The words stung. Jessica loved her career. It was a part of who she was. She tried to explain this to Stefan, but he waved her off, changing the subject to something trivial. It was the first time she felt a gulf between them, a distance she couldn't quite bridge. Over the next few months, Stefan's true nature began to reveal itself. He started taking control of their finances, insisting that it was his responsibility as the husband. At first, Jessica didn't mind. She trusted him. But she began to notice small things, unauthorized withdrawals from their joint account, expensive purchases he hadn't mentioned. When she confronted him about it, he laughed. "Relax, Jess. I'm just making some investments. You'll thank me when they pay off." She wanted to believe him, but unease settled in her stomach. The purchases didn't stop, and his explanations became vaguer. "It's business," he said whenever she pressed for details. "You wouldn't understand." Stefan also began to distance her from her family and friends. He made excuses to skip dinners with her parents, claiming he felt unwelcome. "They've never liked me," he said, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. "They think I'm not good enough for you." Jessica defended him at first, but deep down, she knew her parents' reservations weren't baseless. Her father had always been polite but wary, and her mother's eyes would tighten whenever Stefan spoke about money. Still, Jessica found herself drifting further from them, unwilling to face the discomfort their interactions brought. Her friendship suffered as well. Angela, her best friend, was the first to notice. "You've been distant lately," Angela said one afternoon over coffee. "Is everything okay with Stefan?" Jessica hesitated, then forced a smile. "Everything's fine. He's just been busy with work, and so have I." Angela didn't look convinced. "Jess, you know I'm here if you need to talk about anything." Jessica nodded, but she didn't take Angela up on her offer. She told herself she didn't want to burden her friend, but the truth was more complicated. She didn't want to admit that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. At home, Stefan's behavior grew more controlling. He began criticizing the way she dressed, the people she spent time with, and even the way she spoke in meetings. "You're too direct," he said after she recounted a tense client negotiation. "People don't like that. It makes you seem aggressive." The word hit her like a slap. Aggressive. It was a label she had fought against her entire life, a stereotype often used to diminish successful black women. She tried to brush it off, but it stayed with her, gnawing at her confidence. As the weeks turned into months, Jessica began to feel like a stranger in her own life. She still excelled at work, but her victories felt hollow. At home, she walked on eggshells, afraid of saying or doing something that would trigger Stefan's criticism. Her once vibrant social life had dwindled to occasional text exchanges and rare meetups, always cut short by Stefan's disapproval. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday morning. Jessica was sorting through their mail when she found a statement from an account she didn't recognize. The balance was alarmingly low, and the withdrawals were frequent. Stefan had been funneling money from their joint account into this one without her knowledge. Her heart raced as she confronted him, holding the statement in her trembling hands. Stefan didn't deny it. Instead, he turned the blame on her. "I'm doing this for us," he said, his voice rising. "You're too naive to understand how the real world works. I'm protecting our future." Jessica felt something inside her snap. For too long, she had let him dictate the terms of their relationship, chipping away at her autonomy and confidence. She realized, in that moment, that the man she had fallen in love with no longer existed, if he had ever existed at all. But leaving wouldn't be easy. Stefan had entangled himself in every aspect of her life, and she knew he wouldn't let go without a fight. Still, a seed of resolve had been planted. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't live like this anymore. Jessica sat at her desk, her eyes scanning the financial reports in front of her, but the numbers blurred into meaningless patterns. Her mind was elsewhere, on Stefan, on their last argument, on the growing weight of unease that had settled over her life. She had always prided herself on her ability to focus, to compartmentalize personal and professional issues, but lately, the walls she had built around her mind were crumbling. At home, Stefan's behavior had become increasingly oppressive. What had once been small, dismissive comments had grown into blatant criticisms. He no longer pretended to be interested in her career, dismissing her successes as luck or a result of her family connections. Every conversation seemed to circle back to his dissatisfaction with her priorities. "You're married now," he had said just last night, his voice sharp. "Your focus should be on us, not your job." Jessica had tried to explain that her work was a part of her identity, something that gave her purpose, but Stefan waved her off as if her words were irrelevant. It was becoming a pattern. Her thoughts, her feelings, her needs, they no longer seemed to matter. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Stefan brought up the subject of their finances. He had always insisted on handling the household budget, claiming it was his duty as the husband to manage their money. Jessica had initially agreed, seeing no harm in it. She was busy with her career and trusted Stefan to act in their mutual best interest. But over time, she began to notice discrepancies. Stefan started making large purchases without consulting her. A new watch, expensive, tailored suits, even a luxury car she hadn't known about until it appeared in their driveway. When she questioned him, he brushed her off with vague explanations. "I'm investing in our future," he said, his tone dismissive. "You wouldn't understand." Jessica's unease grew as she discovered more inconsistencies. Bank statements showed significant withdrawals she couldn't account for, and her personal savings seemed to be dwindling. One day, while going through their mail, she found a credit card statement in Stefan's name with a balance that made her stomach drop. He had maxed out the card on lavish expenses, dinners, gifts, trips she hadn't been part of. When she confronted him, Stefan's reaction was swift and cruel. He accused her of not trusting him, of undermining his role as the man of the house. His voice rose and his words cut deep, each one a calculated blow to her self-esteem. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" he spat. "You wouldn't even have this life if it weren't for your parents' money. You don't know the first thing about real work." Jessica was stunned into silence. She had always known Stefan could be sharp-tongued, but this was different. This was venomous. She wanted to fight back, to remind him of her achievements and hard work, but the words caught in her throat. Deep down, a part of her had started to believe him. The isolation followed soon after. Stefan began finding reasons to avoid visiting her parents, claiming they didn't respect him. He discouraged her from attending social events, saying they were a waste of time. When she did manage to see her friends, he would sulk or call her repeatedly, demanding to know when she would be home. Her best friend, Angela, was the first to notice the change. "Jess, you're not yourself," Angela said during one of their rare coffee dates. "You used to be so vibrant, so confident. What's going on?" Jessica forced a smile, brushing off Angela's concerns. "It's just work," she lied. "Things have been stressful lately." Angela didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Still, her words lingered in Jessica's mind, a small crack in the carefully constructed facade she had built around her marriage. At work, Jessica's performance began to suffer. She missed deadlines, forgot important meetings, and found herself unable to concentrate. Her colleagues noticed, but she deflected their concern, blaming her struggles on the demands of her personal life. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of Stefan's control and her own silence. The turning point came one afternoon when Jessica returned home early from work. She found Stefan in his office, hunched over his computer. He didn't hear her come in, too absorbed in whatever he was doing. As she approached, she saw the screen, an email exchange between Stefan and a luxury travel agency arranging a trip to the Maldives. Her name wasn't mentioned anywhere. "Who's the trip for?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Stefan jumped, slamming his laptop shut. His expression shifted quickly from surprise to anger. "Why are you snooping around?" he demanded. "You have no right to invade my privacy." Jessica stood her ground. "I have every right to know how you're spending our money." "Our money?" Stefan laughed bitterly. "Don't kid yourself, Jess. This is my money. I've been the one keeping us afloat while you play at being a career woman." The words cut deeper than she expected. For years, Jessica had fought against the stereotype that black women had to prove themselves twice as hard to be taken seriously. Hearing Stefan dismiss her accomplishments so easily was a blow to everything she had worked for. The confrontation escalated, with Stefan accusing her of being ungrateful and disrespectful. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Jessica stood in the empty hallway, her hands trembling, her mind racing. In that moment, she realized how much of herself she had lost. She had allowed Stefan to chip away at her confidence, to isolate her from the people who loved her, to control every aspect of her life. And for what? To keep the peace? To prove to herself and others that her marriage was worth saving. That night, Jessica lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the woman she used to be, strong, independent, unafraid to take risks. She thought about her parents, who had always taught her to value herself and never settle for less. She thought about Angela, who had seen through her facade even when Jessica refused to. By morning, a seed of resolve had been planted. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to change, and this time she would be the one to take control. Jessica smoothed the fabric of her emerald green dress, taking one last look in the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, poised but uneasy. The dress was stunning, a gift from her mother on her last birthday, but tonight it felt like armor. She was determined to make this evening a turning point, a chance to either salvage what remained of her marriage or confront the truth she'd been avoiding for far too long. She had chosen one of the city's most exclusive restaurants for the occasion. It was the type of place that required reservations months in advance, with its dim lighting, impeccable service, and a menu that could rival the art hanging on the walls. Jessica hoped that the elegant setting might soften Stefan, encouraging him to drop the hostility and let them have an honest conversation. When Stefan arrived, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that Jessica didn't recognize, likely one of his recent purchases. He kissed her cheek, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Jessica couldn't help but notice how his gaze lingered on her dress, followed by a faint smirk. "You look expensive," he said, pulling out his chair. Jessica forced a smile, ignoring the jab. "Thank you for coming tonight. I thought it would be nice to have a quiet evening together." Stefan nodded, signaling to the waiter without consulting her. "Of course. We've both been so busy. It's good to catch up." As the waiter approached, Stefan ordered an extravagant bottle of wine without glancing at the menu. Jessica hesitated but decided not to comment. She would let him take the lead, at least for now. The conversation started innocently enough. Stefan recounted his recent meetings with potential investors, peppering his anecdotes with subtle boasts about his connections. Jessica listened politely, but her mind wandered. His tone, the way he spoke about his accomplishments, it all felt rehearsed, like he was performing for an audience that wasn't even there. When the first course arrived, Stefan turned his attention to Jessica. "So, how's work? Still playing the corporate game?" Jessica set down her fork, feeling her stomach tighten. "It's been challenging, but rewarding. We've just launched a new initiative focusing on sustainable investments. It's something I've been passionate about for a long time." Stefan shrugged, swirling his wine. "Sounds noble, but don't you ever get tired of it? All that stress, the long hours? I mean, you don't need to work. We're doing fine without it." Jessica took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "My work isn't just about money, Stefan. It's about purpose. It's important to me." He leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Of course it is. You've always been so driven, but don't you think it's time to focus on other things, like building a family? You're not getting any younger, Jess." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Jessica felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of anger and embarrassment rising within her. She searched his face for any sign of remorse, but he looked completely at ease, as though he had just made an innocuous observation. "I didn't realize my career and our future were mutually exclusive," she said evenly, her voice carefully controlled. Stefan waved his hand dismissively. "I'm just saying, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've already achieved more than most people ever will. Maybe it's time to slow down and enjoy life." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but the waiter appeared, interrupting with the main course. The timing felt almost deliberate, as if the universe was giving her a moment to collect herself. She glanced down at her plate, the beautifully plated dish almost mocking in its perfection. It was ironic, she thought, how everything around her could appear so polished, while her life felt like it was crumbling. As the meal progressed, Stefan dominated the conversation, recounting his latest networking triumphs and plans for an upcoming business trip. Jessica nodded along, barely listening. Her mind was racing, each passing moment solidifying the realization that their relationship was unsalvageable. When the waiter brought the dessert menu, Jessica decided to test her growing suspicion. She leaned back in her chair, meeting Stefan's gaze with quiet determination. "Why don't you handle the bill tonight?" she said casually. "You've been so generous lately. It's my turn to let you take care of things." Stefan froze, his fork hovering midair. For a moment, his polished facade cracked, revealing a flash of irritation. He quickly recovered, laughing as though she had made a joke. "Jess, come on. You know I don't carry that kind of cash around. Besides, you're the one who wanted this place." Jessica tilted her head, her voice steady. "I thought it would be nice to treat you for once. Or do you mean to say you can't?" The words hung in the air, heavier than anything that had been said all evening. Stefan's jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. "What are you trying to prove?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You're really going to pull this stunt here, in front of all these people?" Jessica didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to prove anything, Stefan. I just thought it was fair." Stefan's anger erupted. He slammed his fork onto the table, drawing the attention of nearby diners. His face was flushed, his carefully curated charm replaced with raw fury. "Fair?" he spat. "You want to talk about fair? Everything I've done for you, for this marriage, and this is how you repay me? You think you're better than me because you have Daddy's money? You're pathetic." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward their table. Jessica felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, but she refused to shrink under his glare. She held her head high, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't about money, Stefan. It's about respect, and it's clear I'm not going to find that here." Stefan's face contorted with rage. Without warning, he grabbed the dessert plate in front of him, a beautifully crafted chocolate tart, and hurled it at her. The plate shattered, the dessert splattering across her dress and face. Gasps echoed around the room as diners recoiled in shock. Jessica sat frozen for a moment, the remnants of the tart sliding down her cheek. Then, slowly, she stood. The humiliation she had felt moments ago was gone, replaced by a calm determination. She reached for her napkin, wiping her face with deliberate precision. "This is over," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. She turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Stefan and the shattered remains of their relationship behind. As she stepped into the cool night air, a sense of clarity washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. It was time to take back control of her life, and she knew exactly where to start. Jessica's heels echoed against the marble lobby floor of her parents' home, the sound a sharp contrast to the deafening silence in her mind. She clutched her purse tightly, her dress still stained with the remnants of the chocolate tart Stefan had hurled at her. The humiliation from the restaurant lingered, but beneath it simmered something far stronger: resolve. The double doors opened before she could reach for the handle. Her mother, Camille, stood framed in the doorway, her sharp eyes scanning Jessica from head to toe. Camille's face, typically composed and elegant, softened with concern as she took in her daughter's disheveled state. "Jessica," Camille said, stepping aside to let her in. "What happened?" Jessica didn't respond immediately. She walked past her mother into the grand foyer, the familiar scent of lavender and polished wood enveloping her. For the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself to relax, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her exhaustion. Her father, Edward, appeared at the top of the staircase, his tie loosened and a book in his hand. The sight of Jessica stopped him in his tracks. He descended quickly, his normally stern expression replaced with one of worry. "Jessica," he said, his voice steady but warm. "Are you all right?" Jessica took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "No, Dad, I'm not." Camille and Edward exchanged a look before guiding her to the living room. The space was as familiar to Jessica as her own reflection. plush armchairs, the soft glow of the fireplace, and framed photographs chronicling their family's milestones. It was a room of comfort, of safety, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. As Jessica recounted the events of the evening, her parents listened in silence. She spared no detail from Stefan's growing hostility to the final explosive scene at the restaurant. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling, and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "I don't know how I let it get this bad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I kept telling myself things would get better, that I just needed to try harder. But I can't anymore. I'm done." Camille reached across the table, placing a steady hand over Jessica's. "You don't need to do this alone, Jessie. We're here for you, whatever you need." Edward nodded, his jaw tight with anger. "You've put up with more than anyone should. It's time to take back control of your life." Their words, simple but sincere, felt like a lifeline. For so long, Jessica had believed she had to face her struggles alone, that admitting she needed help was a sign of failure. But here, in the warmth of her family's home, she realized how wrong she had been. The next morning, Jessica woke to the sound of birds outside her childhood bedroom window. The room was exactly as she had left it years ago, down to the neatly organized bookshelves and framed photos of her college graduation. She sat up slowly, the events of the previous night flooding back with painful clarity. But alongside the pain was a newfound sense of purpose. For too long, she had allowed Stefan to dictate her life, to undermine her confidence and isolate her from the people who loved her. That ended now. Jessica, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks she found in her old closet, and made her way downstairs. Her parents were waiting for her in the kitchen, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. They greeted her with smiles, their warmth bolstering her resolve. Over breakfast, Edward laid out a plan. "I'll connect you with our attorney," he said, his tone decisive. "She's handled cases like this before. We'll make sure Stefan doesn't get away with anything." Jessica nodded, grateful for his support. "I also need to get back to work," she said. "I've been distracted for too long, and it's time I refocus." Camille placed a hand on her shoulder. "Take it one step at a time, Jessie. You don't have to rebuild everything overnight." The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Jessica reached out to a divorce attorney recommended by her father, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Monica Grant. They arranged to meet the following morning to discuss the details of her case. That evening, as Jessica sat with her parents in the living room, a wave of guilt washed over her. She thought about the years she had distanced herself from them, choosing to prioritize a man who had done nothing but tear her down. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice breaking, "for shutting you out, for not listening when you tried to warn me." Camille moved to sit beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You don't need to apologize, Jessie. You did what you thought was right at the time. What matters is that you're here now." Edward nodded from his armchair. "You've always been strong, Jess, stronger than you realize, and now you're taking that strength back." Their words bolstered her, filling her with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jessica allowed herself to hope for a better future, one where she was in control of her own life. The following morning, Jessica arrived at Monica Grant's office, a sleek, modern space in the heart of the city. Monica greeted her with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Let's get started," Monica said, motioning for Jessica to sit. "Tell me everything." As Jessica recounted her marriage to Stefan, Monica listened intently, taking detailed notes. When she finished, Monica leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You have a strong case," Monica said. "We'll gather evidence of financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and any other misconduct. Stefan might try to fight back, but I assure you, we'll be prepared." Jessica nodded, relief washing over her. For the first time since her marriage began unraveling, she felt like she had an ally, someone who believed in her and was willing to fight for her. Over the next few days, Jessica began taking small but significant steps to reclaim her life. She reconnected with Angela, who welcomed her back with open arms, and began reaching out to colleagues she had distanced herself from. At work, she threw herself into her projects, rediscovering the passion that had once driven her. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Stefan wouldn't let go without a fight, and Jessica knew the coming weeks would be filled with challenges. Yet, as she stood in her parents' foyer one evening, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was taking control, step by step, piece by piece. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica felt truly alive. Jessica sat at her desk in her office, her fingers drumming on the polished wood surface. The sunlight streaming through the large windows did little to ease the tension knotting her shoulders. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, reconnecting with old friends, and reestablishing her presence at work. Despite the progress she had made, the specter of her marriage still loomed over her. She knew that Stefan would eventually come for her, and when he did, she had to be ready. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. The caller ID made her stomach tighten. Stefan. She stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, with a deep breath, she swiped to accept the call. "Jessica." Stefan's voice was sharp, his usual veneer of charm gone. "We need to talk." "There's nothing left to discuss," she replied evenly, though her pulse quickened. "Oh, I think there is," he snapped. "You think you can just walk away from this marriage and take everything with you? You're out of your mind." Jessica's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me, Stefan. You've exploited me for years, and it's over. If you have something to say, you can go through my attorney." "I'm not letting some lawyer dictate my life," he growled. "Meet me, tonight. You owe me that much." Jessica hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, but a part of her wanted to face him, to confront him head on. "Fine," she said finally, "but we'll meet in public." They agreed on a neutral location, a cafe near the city center. Jessica arrived early, choosing a table near the window where she could see the street outside. Her heart pounded as she waited, but she steadied herself, reminding herself of how far she'd come. When Stefan arrived, he looked every bit the polished professional, but his eyes betrayed his anger. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the table as if trying to compose himself. "This isn't how it's supposed to be," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "We're supposed to be a team." "A team?" Jessica echoed, incredulous. "You've spent our entire marriage tearing me down, isolating me, and stealing from me. That's not a team, Stefan. That's control." His jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do to keep us afloat. You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter, Jessica. I had to work for everything I have. And you think that justifies everything you've done?" She shot back. "You used me, Stefan. My money, my connections, my reputation. And you still weren't satisfied." Stefan's composure cracked, his voice rising. You're delusional. I built this life for us while you were busy playing at being some corporate savior. You're nothing without me." Jessica's hands trembled under the table, but she refused to let him see her fear. She met his gaze, her voice steady. "You're wrong, Stefan. I was someone before you, and I'll continue to be someone long after you're gone. You don't define me." Stefan's face darkened, and for a moment she thought he might lash out. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a bitter smile curling his lips. "You'll regret this, Jessica. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. I'll ruin you." "Do your worst," she said, standing. "I'm done being afraid of you." Without waiting for a response, Jessica turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart racing. She knew Stefan wouldn't back down easily, but for the first time she felt ready to face whatever came next. That evening, Jessica sat in Monica Grant's office recounting the confrontation. Monica listened carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing as Jessica described Stefan's threats. "We need to document this," Monica said, jotting notes in her leather-bound planner. "Every conversation, every incident. If he tries anything, we'll be ready." Jessica nodded, grateful for Monica's unwavering support. Over the past few weeks, the attorney had become a lifeline, guiding her through the legal maze with precision and empathy. "Do you think he'll follow through on his threats?" Jessica asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Monica looked up, her expression serious. "Men like Stefan don't handle losing control well. He'll try to intimidate you, maybe even manipulate the narrative to paint himself as the victim. But we have the truth on our side, and we'll use it." Jessica left the office feeling a renewed sense of determination. She wasn't the same woman who had endured years of Stefan's abuse. She was stronger now, more resolute, and she wasn't going to let him dictate her life any longer. The next few days were tense. Stefan began a smear campaign, spreading rumors about Jessica to mutual acquaintances. He claimed she had abandoned him, that she was selfish and ungrateful. Jessica heard the whispers, saw the raised eyebrows when she walked into meetings or events. It stung, but she refused to let it shake her. Instead, she focused on her work and the people who truly mattered. Angela became a constant presence in her life, offering unwavering support. Her parents stood by her, their home a refuge when the stress became overwhelming. One afternoon, Jessica received an email from Monica. Attached was a file containing evidence of Stefan's financial misconduct, documents showing how he had funneled money from their accounts to fund his own ventures. Monica had also uncovered correspondence that revealed his manipulation of mutual friends and colleagues. Jessica stared at the file, a mixture of anger and relief washing over her. This was the proof she needed, not just for the divorce proceedings, but for herself. It validated everything she had endured, every moment she had doubted her own perception of reality. As the legal case against Stefan began to take shape, Jessica felt a shift within her. She was no longer a victim, no longer the woman who had silently endured years of emotional abuse. She was reclaiming her narrative, her power, her life. The final confrontation with Stefan loomed on the horizon, but Jessica knew she was ready. She had her family, her friends, her legal team, and most importantly, she had herself. For the first time in years, she felt like the woman she had always been meant to be. Strong, confident, and unafraid. The courthouse was an imposing building of stone and glass, its towering facade a symbol of justice and finality. Jessica stood at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent the past few weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, recounting years of manipulation and bracing herself for the inevitable battle. Today marked the start of the final phase, the divorce hearing. Her parents flanked her, their presence a steadying force. Camille reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this, Jessie. Stay strong." Edward nodded, his stern expression softening as he met his daughter's eyes. This is the end of the road for him. You've already won by taking back your life. Jessica nodded, drawing strength from their words. She took a deep breath and walked through the heavy doors, her heels clicking against the polished floors. Monica Grant was waiting for her inside, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. "Jessica," Monica greeted, her tone professional yet warm. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Jessica replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm ready." As they entered the courtroom, Jessica spotted Stefan sitting at the defendant's table. He was impeccably dressed as always, but there was a tension in his posture, a flicker of unease in his eyes. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and Jessica saw the same man who had once swept her off her feet. But that image was quickly replaced by the reality of who he had become, or perhaps who he had always been. The proceedings began with opening statements, each side laying out their case. Monica spoke with precision and confidence, presenting evidence of Stefan's financial misconduct, emotional abuse, and manipulation. Jessica watched as her lawyer laid out the facts, each piece of evidence cutting through the facade Stefan had worked so hard to maintain. When it was Stefan's turn to speak, he painted himself as the victim. He claimed Jessica had neglected their marriage, prioritized her career over their relationship, and abandoned him without warning. His voice was calm, almost pleading as he spun his narrative. Jessica felt a wave of anger rise within her, but she remained composed. She knew this was his last attempt to control the story, to paint himself as the aggrieved party, but she also knew the truth was on her side. When it was her turn to testify, Jessica took a deep breath and stepped onto the witness stand. She recounted the years of subtle criticism, the isolation from her friends and family, the financial exploitation, and the final explosive confrontation at the restaurant. Her voice remained steady, even as she described the moments that had left her feeling small and powerless. "I stayed because I believed things would get better," she said, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "I thought if I worked harder, if I gave more of myself, it would save our marriage. But I realized that no amount of effort could change someone who didn't want to change. I deserve better. And today, I'm taking the first step toward building the life I deserve." The courtroom was silent as Jessica finished. Even Stefan, who had spent much of the hearing scribbling notes or glaring at Monica, seemed momentarily disarmed. The judge adjourned the proceedings, announcing that a decision would be rendered the following week. As Jessica left the courtroom, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The outcome was no longer in her hands, but she knew she had done everything she could. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. The week passed in a blur. Jessica threw herself into her work, finding solace in the projects she had once loved. She spent evenings with her parents, enjoying simple dinners and rediscovering the warmth of their company. Angela became a regular fixture in her life again, their conversations filled with laughter and the ease of old friendship. When the day of the ruling arrived, Jessica returned to the courthouse with Monica and her parents by her side. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Jessica would retain full ownership of her assets, including her family's business interests. Stefan's claims were dismissed, and he was ordered to repay a portion of the funds he had misappropriated. The weight of the decision hit Jessica like a tidal wave. Relief, vindication, and a profound sense of closure flooded her as the judge's words sank in. She had won, not just the legal battle, but her freedom. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone brightly, a stark contrast to the storm that had loomed over her life for so long. Her parents embraced her, their pride evident in their smiles. "You did it," Camille said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You took your life back." Edward nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Jess. You got a whole future ahead of you." Jessica smiled, her chest swelling with hope. For the first time in years, the horizon felt wide open, filled with possibility. In the weeks that followed, Jessica began rebuilding her life piece by piece. She reconnected with colleagues she had drifted away from, strengthening both her professional network and her personal relationships. At work, she spearheaded a new initiative focused on mentoring young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds, channeling her experiences into something meaningful. She also launched a foundation aimed at supporting women who had faced emotional and financial abuse. The foundation quickly gained traction, with Jessica sharing her story in interviews and speaking engagements. Her vulnerability and resilience resonated with others, inspiring them to find their own strength. Through it all, Jessica never lost sight of the journey that had brought her to this point. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of doubt. They had shaped her, but they did not define her. She was no longer the woman who had dimmed her light to let someone else shine. She was stronger, wiser, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Jessica sat on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the city skyline, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The past was behind her, and the future stretched out before her like an uncharted map. She raised a glass of wine to the night sky, a quiet toast to her journey. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger. Now it was time to embrace the life she was meant to live. Jessica leaned against the railing of her balcony, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin. The city stretched out before her, a sea of lights and energy that felt alive with possibility. For years, she had felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of her marriage and the expectations placed upon her. Now, she stood on the edge of a new chapter, her life finally her own. The foundation she had launched was thriving. Emails poured in daily from women sharing their stories, seeking advice, and expressing gratitude for the resources Jessica's team had made available. Each message was a reminder of why she had chosen this path. Her pain, once a source of shame, had become a beacon of hope for others. Tonight, she was hosting an event to celebrate the foundation's success. Her parents, Angela, and her closest supporters would be there, along with women whose lives had been changed by the programs the foundation offered. Jessica wanted the evening to be more than just a celebration. It was a declaration of her resilience, a moment to honor the strength of every woman who had taken back control of her life. The event was held at Le Jardin, a stunning rooftop venue adorned with lush greenery and twinkling fairy lights. Guests arrived in elegant attire, the soft hum of conversation blending with the gentle strains of a jazz quartet. Jessica greeted each attendee with a warm smile, her confidence radiating. As she moved through the crowd, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found Angela grinning at her, a glass of champagne in hand. "You've outdone yourself, Jess," Angela said, her eyes scanning the beautifully decorated space. "This is incredible." Jessica laughed, clinking her glass against Angela's. "It's not just me. Everyone here played a part. This foundation wouldn't exist without the support of people like you." Angela's expression softened. "You know, it's amazing to see you like this. Strong, happy, free. I've missed this version of you." Jessica smiled, the words sinking in. For so long, she had felt like a shadow of herself, but now she was rediscovering the woman she had always been. "I've missed her too," she admitted. The evening unfolded seamlessly. Guests mingled, sharing stories and making connections. Jessica took the stage at one point, her voice steady as she thanked everyone for their support and spoke about the Foundation's mission. She shared pieces of her journey, her vulnerability resonating with the room. By the time she finished, the applause was deafening. As the night wound down, Jessica found herself on the rooftop terrace, looking out at the glittering skyline. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see her mother approaching, a soft smile on her lips. "You were wonderful tonight," Camille said, stepping beside her. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder." Jessica felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for standing by me, even when I didn't make it easy." Camille reached for her hand, her grip firm but gentle. "You've always been strong, Jessie, even when you didn't see it. Watching you take back your life has been one of the greatest joys of mine." Jessica nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I couldn't have done it without you and Dad. I felt so lost for so long, but you never gave up on me." Camille smiled, her eyes shining. "That's what family is for. And now you're building a new family, a community of women who see their strength reflected in yours. That's something to be proud of." Jessica leaned against her mother's shoulder, the two of them gazing out at the city in comfortable silence. The days that followed were filled with activity. Jessica's foundation continued to grow, and her career flourished as she took on new challenges with a renewed sense of purpose. She began traveling, exploring cultures and cuisines she had always dreamed of experiencing. Each trip brought inspiration, new ideas for the foundation, fresh perspectives on life, and a deeper appreciation for her own resilience. In Morocco, she marveled at the vibrant markets and shared meals with local women who spoke of their own triumphs and struggles. In Japan, she immersed herself in the art of quiet reflection, finding peace in the tranquil gardens and tea ceremonies. Every journey was a step toward healing, a celebration of the life she was reclaiming. Back home, Jessica's apartment became a haven of warmth and creativity. Her walls were adorned with photos and souvenirs from her travels, each one a reminder of the path she had walked. The woman who stared back at her in the mirror each morning was no longer haunted by self-doubt. She was strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Jessica sat at her desk, reviewing plans for the Foundation's next initiative, she received an email from Angela. The subject line read, "Look at you." Curious, Jessica clicked it open and found a link to a news article. The headline read, "From Survivor to Leader, Jessica Williams on Rebuilding a Life of Strength and Purpose." The article detailed Jessica's journey, her work with the Foundation, and her commitment to empowering women. As she read, Jessica felt a swell of pride, not for the recognition, but for the impact she was making. Her story was no longer a source of pain. It was a source of hope. That night, Jessica stepped onto her balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The city lights twinkled like 1,000 tiny promises, each one a testament to the endless possibilities ahead. She thought about the woman she had been when she first met Stefan, bright-eyed and hopeful but uncertain of her worth. She thought about the years she had spent dimming her light to let someone else shine. And she thought about the woman she was now, strong, independent, and unafraid to take up space in the world. Jessica raised her glass to the skyline, a quiet toast to the journey that had brought her here. To new beginnings, she whispered, her voice steady and sure. As she sipped her wine, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined her. She was free to live, to love, to dream, and she was just getting started. Thank you for finishing this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new stories and inspirational content. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends. Maybe it will be an encouragement to someone else. Also, check out our other videos for even more great stuff. See you soon.